like, let's move on to Garber at halftime and some of his more recent comments, but it really sounds like, and Brett, maybe you can explain this better because you were explaining it to me today, that he's ready to go over 20 teams eventually in MLS.
Well, the way it sounds like when he mentioned New York as the potential next team in 2013, but then he also mentioned that the South won't be ignored. So it really sounds like he's planning on expanding past 20.
They want to go past 20. I'm sure of that. They've talked about that. Garber's talked about that fairly often in the last few months. It's just a matter of timing. I don't think it's going to happen in the next 5 years. It may not happen in the next 10 years. Garber keeps using this term. He keeps using this for a fully expanded league. And by that, he means, hitting up every market where it makes sense to put a soccer team.
Absolutely.
In the same way that, in the NBA, the NFL. He's also said that he wants to go to divisions. He said that yesterday. He told the reporters that he wants to eventually go to divisions within MLS. And, you can't quite do that yet. And, he wants to add more teams so that can happen. So it's nice to hear that there's this much optimism that, we're talking about a day when we can expand past 20. It's just not going to be soon.
Yeah, well, I just thought I'd throw it out there. There is this possibility, depending on politics and FIFA, that we might even eventually, and this is sometime in the future, obviously, because the Canadian Soccer Association is not ready yet to take on the full responsibility of having their own first division, as far as I can tell. But it sounds like we might eventually or possibly lose the Canadian teams down the road. So why not seek out more, American, United States-based venues that are open and welcome to having a team?
I don't know if they are thinking of it that way. I mean, they've said they are committed to improving Canadian soccer and staying in Canada, and I don't see anything wrong with, keeping these teams as part of the picture. I think it's cool. I think it lends a little something different to our league. It's no secret that really Canadian teams in American leagues they don't do as well necessarily. Vancouver, the Grizzlies didn't last in Vancouver. You've got all these hockey teams moving out of Canada, which is a real bummer. But
yeah,
I think it kind of makes sense for soccer. It's the international game and there are very good Canadian players. We've seen it, and in a way, I think that it could only help the American game as well. It's sort of a symbiotic relationship. Yeah. I know that sounds overly romantic. Sorry about that, but
that's all right.
I like it personally. Yeah. I like it. Canadian fans have a lot of passion.
I think we all like it. I think the sense that I get is that FIFA, of course, has stated in the past that this is not necessarily a permanent deal and that they'd like to see Canada eventually have their own first division. They've made the exception for Cardiff from Wales playing.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So there are exceptions, but the question is how long the exception lasts. But let's move on because, first we're moving to, according to Garber, 10 teams next season making the playoffs. And I've recommended just that when we have 20 teams, but not when we have 18. We're back to having more than 50% of the league qualifying for the playoffs. Why not just wait until 2013 when we have 20 teams? And does that essentially make the regular season even less important? I think that's kind of what Alexi was getting at halftime and hinting at Garber. Maybe is that too much?
Yeah, it's definitely a valid argument. I mean, I was surprised by it too. And Garber announced this to the press before the game, so we all had kind of a clue as to what was going on. And these were the questions that he fielded. That asked him, Don, don't you think that devalues the playoffs even more? And he said, no, I don't disagree with that. We haven't reached final decisions on a lot of these things. There are a lot of things that we still need to figure out. Are they going to be, home and home? Is it still going to be? Are we going to have a neutral? Are we going to retain a neutral site MLS Cup? How are we going to seed these teams? Do we still want them moving over across conferences? So I don't think this is a done deal. I think they're still trying to find the right format for the playoffs. And, I mean, let's be honest, this is something that MLS has done since the beginning. They keep messing with the playoff system to see how they get it right. Yeah. You have a lot of people who want MLS's playoffs to be more like the rest of the American sporting leagues because that's what American sports fans are used to. Mm-hmm. You've got soccer purists who say, look, you need to give a lot of emphasis to the regular season champion. We don't feel like the Supporters' Shield winner is rewarded enough. They're dealing with a lot of different voices, a lot of different people in their ear. I don't think they're done yet. I don't think they know what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
But adding 2 more teams to the playoffs, I don't know if it's the right time for that either.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I mean, you certainly can't say it worked out this year the way they did it. So why not try something else?
Yeah. It just seems to me, I mean, and maybe to others that maybe, and I'm not a purist, and certainly I don't mind the playoffs. I just, again, one of the arguments I had made before is that if you're going to bring in 10, when you have 20 teams, 10 in the playoffs, then you have maybe 2 groups of the lower, 8 that battle it out to find out who plays the 1 and 2 seed, which makes actually the regular season much more important, because if you're the 1 and 2 seed, you don't have to play, until the winner of the 8 that behind them that made it go through. So, maybe that's an idea. I don't know how far that's going, but Garber says that the playoff games are the highest rated and the most watched, thus the playoffs need to be expanded. And should we do whatever is highest rated is my question. If let's say, for instance, settling ties through naked mud wrestling or something like that between, cheerleaders at the end of the game got high ratings, is that what we should do? Of course not. But how do we know when we've crossed the line trying to appease and trying to get the highest ratings?
Yeah, that's the constant struggle. I mean, how do you make the fans sit in the seats? And this is one of the reasons why they're also discussing perhaps not doing a neutral site MLS Cup game anymore and awarding it to the higher seeded team.
I agree.
So I mean, I guess the long-winded answer to this is there is no answer. They're not sure what the right solution is yet.
Yeah.
When I think at its base, I'm not thrilled about 2 more teams in the playoffs, because I agree. The thing that I really liked about this year's playoff field is that regardless of the fact that the format was wacky and you had your 2 Western teams in the Eastern Conference Final, it was pretty inarguable that you had absolutely the 8 best teams in the league in the playoffs. And that is, to me, that is the first time in league history this has ever happened. Statistically, it's completely true. Yep. Every single team in the playoffs was deserving. They were statistically the best teams out of them all. Statistically, the best field of 8 ever in MLS history. So that was great. So I mean, that's what you want to see. I guess I'm not as upset about this extra play-in round, because you're still going to have a field of 8. So, I guess
it's like a wild
works
card
until
game.
Otherwise. Yeah, so I don't know. We're going to have to see. I think at this point MLS fans are getting used to something new every year, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, the big thing that I took from what Garber was talking about during halftime was he hinted at eventually in the future of switching to a European format. At least that's the way I took it, because he mentioned how it's not that cold in Toronto in November, joking around or what. But does it seem like is it possible that the consultants that he talks about they are planning on bringing in are officials from the Bundesliga, since we have a kind of a partnership roughly between them?
It may be. I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that, I don't know if this is a direct cause of it, but I mean, it's certainly no coincidence that FIFA President Sepp Blatter has said the U.S. has to switch to an international calendar if it wants to be a sustainable league.
Right.
And there's pros and cons for it. My biggest problem with it is that weather thing. I don't know if fans are going to come out in the dead of winter to see a game in Chicago or in Toronto.
Well, how about skipping? How about, like the Bundesliga, just skipping January then, Jonah?
That's what Garber also said they were considering. The format that seemed most likely to them is to start the season in late summer, take a break, around December, and then start up again maybe in late February, and then run through the spring. Yeah. And that's a longer break than the Bundesliga does. The Bundesliga only has a few weeks.
Right.
The Scandinavian leagues all take a month off, and those kind of weather conditions might be a little more in line with what we face in our northern markets. So that makes sense. Yeah. And he also said that, some of the other problems they found is, take last night, for instance. It's the championship game, and you're going up against Sunday Night Football. That's the Giants against the Eagles.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's obviously going to draw a lot of people. And it just seems to keep happening that these big MLS games have to compete with these enormous other sporting games, and that's not good for anyone. I mean,
No.
you don't want to fracture your market like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And March Madness is a horrible conflict because that's right around the time MLS is getting started, and these kinds of things are inevitable. The nice thing about the schedule that we have now is you're only going up against baseball.
Right.
And, at least for most of the season. And baseball games are every day. So,
Yeah.
you hope that soccer fans are going to come out for an MLS game that's once every couple of weeks. So, twice a week. So, I don't know. I think eventually going with the FIFA calendar might be okay. The thing that I like the best about it is the obvious angle that MLS would take breaks for international play. I think that is absolutely crucial. I don't think it's good to have our league going while national teams are playing,
Right.
especially when, more and more MLS guys are, not even just in the U.S., like all over the world, more MLS guys are playing on the national teams. I mean, we need to be able to point to those games and say, look, we've got MLS players in these important international games. And that's crucial for the profile of the league.
Yeah. The good news is if we do switch, cold weather people are just used to cold weather, and they'll come out in February and support their team. I just feel that. But, what in God's name, and maybe you can help me with this, because Garber mentioned yesterday what he called simulated promotion and relegation. What does that mean, Jonah? We're trying to figure it out, and maybe you could help.
Sorry, say it again. I lost you there for a second.
Yeah, Garber mentioned last night that he is considering something that he called, and I quote, simulated promotion and relegation. Do you have any idea what he's talking about?
Not a clue. Some things I just leave to the dawn. Not a clue.
Simulated. Yeah, I just couldn't figure that out. Now, my only guess is that, at some point maybe it's almost like NASCAR where, at some point during the season, the top so many teams move on to this race for the chase while everybody else is kind of, relegated to the bottom and to fight it out. But I didn't understand that. But he did say the word simulated promotion and relegation. So I had to bring that up.
I don't know what to say. The funniest moment that there was last night when people were talking about, like, why even bother with conferences if geography doesn't matter? And, there were all these Canadian reporters there, and they said, you remember there was once upon a time where the NHL had the Campbell Conference and the Prince of Wales Conference. So why don't we, for instance, have, the Don Garber Conference? And then Garber just started laughing. He said, well, that wouldn't be good. That would mean I'd be 6 feet under. So,
Absolutely.
I can't predict what the guy's going to say. I don't know what the promotion thing is. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I just thought it was one of those quotes that somehow slipped by everybody today, but I definitely heard it, recorded it, and played it back, so I know he said it. I'm just not sure what the hell it means.